When you run after a mirage, you're fated to end up in a desert. So I'll decode that introductory statement a bit later in this content, but on March 27th of 2025, FitLife Brands updated the public markets by releasing their 2024 fourth quarter earnings report, and I'll be utilizing those financial documents along with notes I took while listening to the earnings conference call and any relevant publicly disclosed information to obviously update you on the recent performance of the various supplement companies within the FitLife Brands portfolio, but also utilize everything as the contextual backdrop for my expanded strategic commentary involving functional CPG categorical market dynamics and trends. But for anyone new to these quarterly content pieces, FitLife Brands sells more than 250 SKUs across 13 supplement brands, each with a slightly different product portfolio and sales channel strategy. In total, the FitLife Brands portfolio is sold through more than 20,000 retail locations globally. But throughout this content, you'll hear me categorize the FitLife Brands portfolio into three segments: Legacy FitLife Brands, Mimi's Rock Corporation, and MusclePharm. But to start us off, let's dive into some of the financial data. In the fourth quarter of 2024, the consolidated FitLife Brands portfolio had revenue of just over $15 million, which was up 13% year over year, but down around 6% on a quarter-over-quarter sequential basis. But while the consolidated portfolio's year-over-year growth rate appears strong, it's important to remember that those reported results were greatly impacted by the MusclePharm acquisition closing in October of 2023. But before I transition into sharing a detailed collection of segment level updates that I think are important when trying to understand the FitLife brand story, I wanted to quickly mention some full year 2024 financial numbers. During the 12 months ending December 31st, FitLife Brands had revenue of $64.5 million, which was an increase of 22% compared to the previous year, though an even greater impact on annual year-over-year comparative percentages occurred due to the MusclePharm acquisition closing in October of 2023. But let's shift into that collection of detailed segment-level updates, starting with the sales channel mix of FitLife Brands, which has been a major focus of the company's leadership over the last 5 years. Historically speaking, aka the legacy FitLife Brands, these supplement brands generated most of their revenue from the specialty retailer GNC. And by most, I mean like close to 80% at one point. But that key customer risk felt consistently more problematic because of the seemingly episodic business troubles and strategic leadership changes that GNC has experienced over the last decade. Yet, that concentration of revenue lowered again in 2024 as 58% of legacy FitLife Brands segment level revenue was attributed to GNC and only 23% of the consolidated FitLife Brands portfolio revenue. And the revenue diversification within the legacy FitLife Brands segment has come from additional focus being placed on e-commerce and specifically Amazon. Additionally, consider the legacy FitLife Brands mentality of we don't want to step on GNC franchisees. That avoids channel conflict by pricing products higher on Amazon, and that segment level revenue diversification effort should feel slightly more impressive. Moreover, after acquiring the Amazon-focused Mimi's Rock Corporation, FitLife Brands would now actually be considered a digital-first supplement brand portfolio, with e-commerce accounting for about 2/3 of total full year 2024 revenue. And just to kind of close the loop on this sales channel detail for the consolidated FitLife Brands portfolio, during the fourth quarter, online revenue was approximately $10.1 million, an increase of 12% year over year, and wholesale revenue was around $4.9 million, an increase of 15% year over year. But again, the entirety of that year over year growth, plus some more on both sales channels, came from the non-comparable timing aspect of the MusclePharm acquisition. But let's next shift into some additional segment data detail for Mimi's Rock and MusclePharm, which might help provide further context into the FitLife brand story. In the fourth quarter, Mimi's Rock Corporation's revenue was slightly less than $6.9 million, which was essentially flat year over year. If we look at Mimi's Rock performance a layer deeper, the Dr. Tobias brand, which represents, I think, a bit more than 90% of the total segment, increased revenue 6% year over year. But that positive revenue growth was completely offset by a sharp revenue decline coming from the two skincare brands. It was noted that after the acquisition last year, FitLife Brands had determined that much of the skincare brand's business outside of the US and Canada was unprofitable and at times even from a gross margin perspective, and thus required elimination by exiting several countries completely and raising prices in several others. As a result, Mimi's Rock segment increased its contribution margin 690 basis points year over year, which is impressive when you, again, consider its flat revenue performance. And then MusclePharm revenue in the fourth quarter was about $2.8 million, but year over year comparatives were greatly impacted by the acquisition closing in October of 2023. Furthermore, segment level revenue activity was almost non-existent in the fourth quarter of 2023 as FitLife Brands leadership needed to unravel the bankruptcy survival focused strategic decisions and mess from years of MusclePharm mismanagement. But on a quarter over quarter sequential basis, MusclePharm revenue increased about 14% and amounted to the highest quarterly revenue for the brand since it was acquired. And while the full year 2024 sales channel mix at MusclePharm was evenly split between wholesale and online revenue, the fourth quarter started to signal that the brand's biggest long-term commercial opportunities will come from offline retailers. Since the acquisition, FitLife Brands has been reestablishing relationships with MusclePharm's existing and previous wholesale customers, but that takes patience and the ideal product mix to fit wholesale channel partners. But maybe that products are built to fit channels because channels don't mold the product's strategic mantra is a perfect transition into decoding my introductory statement about mirages. I was quite confident that FitLife Brands understood it's a marathon and not a sprint with MusclePharm. Moreover, the last 5 or 7 years of MusclePharm brand mismanagement had provided a sizable amount of unlocked value that was just waiting to come out. Furthermore, doing the required hard work upfront to rebuild the foundation of MusclePharm for the long haul would inherently unlock enough short-term financial results to appease shareholders around the acquisition ROI. Yet that's not what's happening right now. Instead, FitLife Brands has surprised me, and not in a good way, believing it would be better served in reaching arbitrary segment-level financial goals by deciding to chase various mirages. Within my last quarterly content piece on FitLife Brands, I outlined my utter shock around leadership's inability to learn from past MusclePharm experiences and how becoming a victim of product line extension creep became a major underlying driver of its failure. Though the strategic decision by FitLife Brands, pandering to a retailer request for this or that exclusive MusclePharm line extension, is an immaterially small mistake compared to what I'll analyze next. But to set the tone for that announcement, it might be valuable to recall some comments from that previous quarterly content piece on FitLife Brands. There is no argument that MusclePharm is currently the most significant organic growth opportunity within FitLife Brands. I think anyone with one good eye can see that. But I still get this feeling that people inside that organization have different definitions around the most significant organic growth opportunity. Admittedly, reaching that $20 million run rate, which equals double the current run rate, is almost a kindergarten level goal. You don't need much strategic vision to achieve that result. But getting MusclePharm to that financial level won't make anyone notice or care about FitLife Brands outside of maybe industry strategy nerds like me or some retail investors that like to gamble. So then realizing that, are some of the FitLife Brands leadership members maybe the most ambitious ones that hate being overlooked, thinking that there's a chance of getting to the heyday of MusclePharm, both from an influence, impact, and revenue perspective? I sure hope not, especially proving through the actions that it doesn't truly have a handle on the variables driving today's performance nutrition categorical market anyways, even beyond this recent reversion to bad business decisions of MusclePharm past. Admittedly, those previous statements were ominously dark because I wanted to get the point across that it's extremely important within today's performance nutrition categorical marketplace to recognize mirages and choose your actions cautiously. In fact, I talked about the potential impacts from chasing the ready-to-drink beverage mirage in FitLife Brands content from a year ago. So what has me all up in arms? We already heard previously from FitLife Brands leadership that they would relaunch some historically successful MusclePharm products. I stated that they needed to focus on rebuilding the Assault Energy platform and refining the Combat Protein platform. While I didn't explicitly state this, I meant in the ready to mix powder form factor. That's because FitLife brands are good operators with solid track records of driving sales inside specialty supplement retailers. And while they sell a legacy SKU or two in large retailers, they are not proficient in those sales channels. So if they move into ready to eat or, God forbid, ready to drink form factors again anytime soon, they would need to significantly retool their sales leadership and organizational structure to make a categorical impact. FitLife Brands has meaningfully begun almost zero of the hard work required in rebuilding connection and trust with customers, reconstructing the brand story, rebuilding community, and bringing it all to life with layers of compelling content. And because FitLife Brands decided to sprint through the MusclePharm turnaround plan instead of being strategically conservative to rebuild the foundation for future growth opportunities at MusclePharm, it will undoubtedly expose its weaknesses even more prominently and create unnecessary burden across the entire organization. Again, maybe I'm being too ominous, but by simply listening to the Q&A portion of this quarter's earnings call, you'd realize that MusclePharm is highly exposed to an inflationary commodity with zero pricing power, and FitLife Brands entered a beverage format with zero route to market expertise. But beyond the several other puzzling aspects I could mention here, all this really does is show me that FitLife Brands still has no vision around MusclePharm, believing that running after mirages won't leave them exposed to the suffering attached to desert landscapes. And though I've previously highlighted FitLife Brands lacking strong visionary voices throughout the organization, even years before the MusclePharm deal, it's go time now to fill that human capital gap because you've went too deep into Mirage search mode, and being a good shepherd to the brand in the latter part of its life cycle is no longer an available strategic game plan. But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than 3/4 of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.